So I want to take you back to 1972. Anybody born then? Probably not. Okay. So what happened that year? You had Watergate. Nixon was president. You had war demonstrations. The Lions were 8-5-1, and that year was the year I took my first drink. And I was 12. And I remember it pretty distinctly. I was in my parents' basement, and a couple of things about that I remember. My parents' basement had kind of that gaudy orange furniture, and also my parents' bar, which was stocked with liquor. My brother, who was a budding rock and roll singer back then, big hair, we all had big hair back then. We grabbed a quart of brandy from my parents' bar, and we said, "Why don't you drink it?" And I took the drink, and I remember when I had the first drink of brandy down my stomach. I felt the burning, I gagged, but boy did I love it. And I thought during that time that, why did I drink? I mean, I was kind of an awkward kid. I was kind of thrown around a bit by other kids. I was harassed a bit. You know, I had a nose too big for my face, I had acne, those kinds of things. So I was kind of at an age where I wanted to be approved, I wanted to be accepted. So my brother Mike said, "Drink." I said, "Went ahead and drank." But the interesting thing about that experience when I did that is that I felt differently than I ever had before. When it hit my system, I felt a sense of calm. And with all the anxiety I had growing up, that sense of calm was something that I had never experienced before. And I felt like I was on my way. I can tell you that alcohol during my life, and I had alcohol issues for the next 30 years after that, became one of my best friends, and it took me down some pretty tough roads. So today what I want to talk to you about is 3 lessons I learned from that experience that changed my life, that I believe that you could learn to change yours as well. So the first being is, who do you want to be? So let me tell you, let me kind of illustrate an example of that. January 5th, 2002, I woke up about 4 a.m. and I had a wicked hangover. And I got up and realized that my bed was wet and it was not water. And I got up and went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and what I saw was something that frightened me. The usual handsome guy, like here, right, wasn't that case. I had a large lump in my forehead. I had fallen the night before and did not remember falling. One thing that struck me that morning was a sense that there was a voice that spoke to me that moment. And the voice said, "Stop." And I was like, what's that? I wasn't sure what that was about, but it just, something was saying stop to me. So like logically, I tried to go back to bed and tried to think about it, but I was disturbed. So I thought for that morning about my life a bit, kind of how I gotten to that point. You know, during the last few months, the blackouts had gotten worse. I drove drunk. I had a DUI. My career was in jeopardy, but I kept drinking. I had a former girlfriend named Barb, and the night before she was encouraging me to drink. She always said, "I like you when you drink." And all I remember from that point was filling my glass, and after that, nothing. So the voice really kind of got me thinking, should I quit? And I tried to quit before, lasted maybe a day, couldn't do it. So I went over to see Barb that day. I said, "I think I want to quit drinking." And her response was not what I expected. "That's kind of a stupid idea," she said. "You're not an alcoholic. You go to work every day, you've got a college degree, you know, alcoholics aren't that way at all. So basically, that's stupid." So I went back home and continued to think about what I should do. which leads me to the next step, and that is you need an action plan. So everybody that has aspirations of improving your life, you have to be able to take those steps to make it work. So my action plan that day was to get up and go to the hospital and check myself in. And I was scared shitless. I didn't want to do it. And finally I got the muster up, wanted to drink, but didn't. And I walked a cold mile in a January night to the nearby hospital, to the emergency room, where I spoke the most important words that I ever spoke in my life, that I'm an alcoholic and I can't stop drinking. So ironically, hearing voices the way I did, they admitted me to a psych bed in the emergency room, with a glass, they locked it. I wasn't sure what state of mind I had, but I don't think it was very good. And they didn't restrain me, but basically everything else. And I laid there all that night, and every inch of my being wanted to get up and leave. Probably by 3 a.m., the shakes began already. But then the voice continued to bring clarity. And what I heard then was, stop drinking or die. And it was very clear. So the third part of what I wanted to talk about was accepting who you are, the person that you're becoming. Because one thing I'll tell all of you is that when you move forward and you change your life this way, you're going to be a different person. So in rehab, I had this counselor. His name was Bill, and he wore a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, smoked a pipe, and I didn't like him at all. He kept rubbing me the wrong way. He kept saying, "You're thinking too much. You need to accept the 12 steps." And I wanted to think through why I'd gotten to this point where I'd almost destroyed my life. I had to think it through. And so our sessions were they weren't very pleasant. Pushed me and pushed back. But I remember on a Friday morning in late January 2002, I was stoked because, you know what, I just got my coin the day before that I graduated from rehab. And I thought, wow, I beat Bill. I was happy. So he sat down and he pushed a piece of paper to me. Discharge summary, so I read it. Let's see. Alcoholism, now it's something different. Check. Okay. Family history of alcoholism. Brother, parents, grandfather, check. Discharge summary, check. Finally to the prognosis. 10% chance of long-term sobriety. And I looked at that and I said to Bill, Bill, what is this? He said, you have all kinds of risk factors. You have family issues. You're not really accepting the program very well. I don't think you have much of a chance. And I did the only logical thing I could that day. I shook his hand, thanked him, and I walked out the door. Didn't take his advice for well because I was just plain arrogant that day. So 2 months after rehab, I did what Bill told me not to do. I decided to go back to the scene of the crime, and that is my favorite neighborhood bar, a place called Mickey's, where I'd spent many Wednesday nights drinking myself into oblivion. I sang karaoke, thinking that I could quit my day job and I could become a singer and those kinds of things. So I wanted to go back, and I hadn't gone anywhere until that time. So I walked into the door and to sit down at the bar stool, and before I could even sit down, John, the bartender, had slid an ice-cold bottle of Coors Light right in front of me. my favorite beer. And I looked down at that beer, and I saw it was steamed, it was cold, there was a frosted glass, and I was like salivating. I wanted to drink that beer more than anything else. And what I thought about at that moment, I looked at that beer, was 10%. And it struck me that that was a very valuable lesson. So I pushed the beer away and said, John, I don't drink anymore. Can you get me a Diet Coke? He did. So that day I sat there, drank the Diet Coke. I thought about what he had given me. I thought about the fact that being told 10% didn't mean that the glass was 90% empty. It was actually 10% full. So one question I want to ask all of you is, what have you done when you were underestimated? When you were told that you didn't have much of a chance? Think about that a second. So one thing I learned from that experience then was reimagining myself in terms of who I wanted to be, and the action plan, and then accepting who I became had to be an ongoing process every day the rest of my life. And I realized I need to thank him for what he gave me. So last year, I accepted a position at CMU, and what I felt like this was like the culmination of years of research, teaching, professional administrative responsibilities. So I got tenured position, full professor, my dream. Okay, moved here, bought a beautiful house on a lake, the American dream. But there was something missing for me. What was missing was the fact that the story I'm telling you right now, I never told anybody. As a matter of fact, I basically hid it from most people, ashamed to talk about it. So I processed that and realized that the same lesson I learned, which is who do I want to be, came back into play again. Do I want to be the person that tells the story? And I can tell you that being an educator, I'm comfortable in the classroom. But am I comfortable bearing my soul to all of you? No. It's very difficult. But I realized that I had no choice. I had to do that. So I wrote a book. It's called Labyrinth, which, not the greatest book, but you know what it is. But it talked about my life. And I made the decision then I wanted to start speaking about my life. So the action plan. I needed to write my story and determine how I was going to give it. So I hired a speaking coach. I got involved with a professional organization for speaking. And so over the last year, I began to build that story. So the last thing about accepting who you are. One thing I'll tell all of you to think about now is life is about, to me, is about a series of chapters. And in my own experience, the chapters, some of them were not as good as others. I mean, I had some tough chapters. What I realized from that experience was those tough chapters form the very foundation of your life, and they make you appreciate how precious life is. So I was able to get to that point by using the same steps. So in summary, for all of you, I want you to think about it, is who do you want to be in your life? Are you where you want to be right now, or do you want more? And everybody is in the state of that. Everybody has aspirations for improvement. So I would encourage you to think about that.